Alrighty. Rocking and rolling. Welcome once again. This is Escaping Dystopia. My name is Wall. I'm your host. And really, your only thing, I guess. We'll see. I haven't really had much traffic here over on the YouTube trying to do this. This is the second time we've been doing this here. We continue to be in Facebook jail. Oh, for redirecting something that Trump once tweeted towards the new chairwoman of the House Finance Committee, I believe, Maxine? Anyway, you can't say what he says to other people. Anyway, so let's run through some of the stuff. Today was a big news day. If I had done the show yesterday, there would be a lot of stuff. So we're going to cover some of that today. There was another shooting this morning in California. We don't have a whole lot of details yet. It looks to be another white male, late 20s veteran. Had a history of some issues. We might talk about that a little bit more next week unless there's another mass shooting between now and then. It sounds like this was slightly different in that he did not use an assault weapon. He did have an extended clip, it sounds like, but the bit of a history there. We'll see what goes out to there. The other big thing that happened today, the White House put out a fake doctored video clip to attack a reporter while denying them access after asking some pointed questions of the president. And also the new acting attorney general has an interesting history that kind of showed up today. So we'll talk a little bit about those later. That was today's news that came out big. So had I done the show yesterday like I should have, here's what we were going to do. Talk a little bit about the racist closing ads. One of the things that really happened down the stretch for this election was Trump went full on racist. The ad, and I actually did see this live, so I was watching the football game Sunday night, so I actually did get to see his racist ad, and it was a racist ad. It was very, very straightforward. If you were a white supremacist watching that, you were cheering. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a little bit. That kind of is what the GOP has become. Wondering if I should just go through this. We'll go through this real quick. We'll talk about that a little bit later, what the GOP has become. And this shows up in a lot of this stuff now, and this will become more clear now moving forward over the next bit of time as we try and figure out how to move forward as a country in this environment. How they did in the elections. We'll talk some more expanding about that. Generally, there was the wave. And what I saw, and why I say that is because the overall margin between the Democrats, the number of votes they got, versus what the Republicans got, it was very, very weighted toward the Dems. Now, the numbers and actually House seats really demonstrate the other issue that we've been looking at here with the gerrymandering. But the basics of it, the Dems took the House by a number of seats. There's still a few elections that are gonna have to have recounts and close calls. The GOP expanded their hold in the Senate, which was this was generally what was expected and predicted for these results in the last couple weeks. We'll have some more post-game analysis next week. Here in my home state of Colorado, it was a pretty much clean sweep. The Democrats dominated by 5-6 points on a lot of stuff. We now have an openly gay governor here in the state of Colorado, along with our legal weed. It's true. Just like Canada. And now that Jeff Sessions is gone, we'll see what happens on the federal level with that, with a new attorney general, if we ever get one. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. A friend of mine was running for a House seat in Oklahoma, and he unfortunately did not win. I was hoping to celebrate that. But running in a Democrat in Oklahoma is always a difficult uphill battle. So maybe next time. So good luck, JJ. I appreciate the effort and a lot of this stuff. You know, the first half of any of this kind of stuff is showing up, right? And doing it. As I say here on the show, that wouldn't exist if I didn't just show up and do it. Even if there's no one watching. It's all good. My kids will love it one day, maybe. Oh, lordy. Anyway, it's all good. So the margin was actually bigger than I kind of first thought when it came out, and this is one of the reasons why this is a little slow is because 10% of the country lives in California. Plus, I think it's like actually 40 million. I think now in California, with their two senators. I hope this issue becomes talked about a little bit more. But once that's where a lot of the votes in the country are, and you see this very lopsided Dem to Republican, but that's where a lot of part of our economy is, and a lot of the engines that drive this nation and agriculture. Um, in the aforementioned 10+% of the country live in that state, which has a very small representation. I do like the idea of breaking California up into like 5 states or whatever, but I don't know if that will ever happen. I do think, and we'll talk about this a little bit more about the Senate, what it's going to take to actually retake the Senate, because now the country has this weird kind of natural gerrymander, and maybe that'll be the subject, the natural gerrymander of the Senate, and how to address that. So we have a government that's more representative of the population, and certainly of the way that what drives our economy. Because you have these situations where you have these senators from these really small states with really small populations, really small economies, with a great deal of power to influence these other industries. So the opportunity for corruption in that environment becomes really, really, really big. Speaking of corruptions, the president has fired his attorney general. This was had been a red line for Lindsay, but Lindsay says, "Okay, I think I can take the job now, sir." So he fired him. There's a number of repercussions for this. This is still playing out because he did it right after the elections to blow away the news cycle, as has happened quite a bit. Oh, actually, jeez. Sorry, we have to talk about something else at the end. We'll get to. Yeah, I think we're just going to do one run through on this, so we'll just cover it as we will. So we knew this was coming after the election, right? Because he talked about this before, that he wanted to do this, and we knew it was going to happen. And so what the effect of this is right now is he said that Sessions' chief of staff, who was appointed last year, and I don't believe went through the Senate, is now the acting attorney general. And now because Sessions had personally recused himself from the Russia investigation, because I guess I talked to him maybe a couple times. It was perfectly all right, but yeah, we might have talked about sanctions. I will recuse myself. So anyway, he had recused himself, which means Rosenstein, was in overseeing the investigation. So now that there's a new acting attorney general, which is odd that it's not Rosenstein, he now oversees it. Now this guy, Matt Whitaker, is a right-wing ideologue and looks to be hand-picked to end this investigation, and in fact got Trump's attention by writing an op-ed for CNN, which he's completely unaware of, and going on TV and making the argument, because CNN pays people to argue both sides so they can get you to watch, so they can make money. So they paid him to come on and spout this ridiculous stuff. So Trump hired him to be this chief of staff for Sessions. Apparently they clashed heads a number of times, and most of the people in the DOJ saw him as kind of a mole from the White House. He now runs the Justice Department momentarily. If that sticks, this again will go to the Supreme Court, which they've now packed. The other news, the big news from this morning, I didn't talk about, because that scared everybody. There's a lot of heart attacks this morning. Ruth Bader Ginsburg had to go to the hospital after falling and breaking a few ribs and just trying to toughen it out, and then she went home. She's like, maybe not so much. So she went to the hospital this morning, and they're looking at her. She is like the prototypical tough old bird, as they say. So I don't think, not too much, but I believe she's currently 85 years old, fourscore and cinco. We're hoping we make that up to at least 5 score, if not more. So hopefully this will just be another bump in her road. But that was some of the other heart-stopping news from this morning. So Trump fires Sessions, mass shooting, going after this, and then there's that follow-up. Ruth Bader Ginsburg goes to the hospital. So it was quite the news day, to say nothing. So the other thing on the Mueller investigation, there's also some other inklings coming out that they're going to wrap it up, and that he had been being quiet for the last little while, following Department of Justice protocols that Comey couldn't follow. By the way, when he rat fucked Hillary a couple years ago, you may recall this. Doing his, oh, I think we opened the investigation again. I just had to tell you guys, thanks, quiet, okay, bye. That was leaked, by the way, by Jason Chaffetz, who then resigned and now is a Fox News analyst. Fox, by the way, has their anchor. Hannity actually went on stage and gave a speech. So did, I think it's Pirro or whatever, one of the other nutballs on Fox. So the line between Fox and the Trump campaign completely disappeared at the end of it, including that whole Caravan thing, which has now fallen to exactly where it should be on the awareness of our nation, which is not really, because it's such a common occurrence that's actually not the huge deal they were making it. And it probably won't even show up. Apparently they've ended the mission for the military mission down to the border as well, or at least got rid of the name of it. It was Operation Faithful Patriot, and I'll say that now, so hopefully this will be remembered at some point, because it will be disappeared from the official military books. There will be no Operation Faithful Patriot badges that people wear. But they apparently spent a couple $100 million on this mission to go set up barbed wire and just get images of barbed wire going up to help save some Senate seats. It worked. It didn't work for the House. And this is kind of that whole, and I mean, this is why, talking about Trump's racist ads, they use the military for their racist ads, so that the news will report that the military was mobilizing for this threat that didn't exist from these caravans. That's where we are, folks. I mean, and this is one of the things, like, I started this show a couple years ago, and that's the name of it, is Escaping Dystopia, because I knew, whatever, that what some of the dynamics of the situation were not going to change. We're going to be quite bad. And this last election, was a chance to get a check on that. And we did that, and to a degree. And we also saw how difficult that's going to be. Mueller might indict Don Jr.'s children soon. And if something like that happens, you'll see them move even quicker to end this whole thing. The guy who's in charge of it, really, Matt Whitaker, really has went on and advocated that it was out of control, and even said how he would starve it by not funding it. Which actually is interesting, because that strategy won't work, because I think they're nearly done. But anyway, so there's a lot of stuff going on with that whole investigation, that whole side of it, and that whole fun. So, on the Dems taking the House. Needed it, right? I mean, this is one of the things that, had this not happened now, the investigation would absolutely have disappeared. We would never find out what had happened there, and we would continue to see a lot of these really nasty, horrid politics really go on with no scrutiny whatsoever. We saw, when you don't have an opposition party, what happens. At least when Republicans are in control. I have a feeling had Obama had the same kind of pliable Congress, we'd all have flying cars right now that run on solar power, or at least something along those lines. But alas, missed opportunities. Actually, I could say that about Al Gore too, from 20 years ago. And I know there's actually people who could be watching this who weren't even alive, who could have voted in this election, who weren't alive in 2000 when we made that huge mistake as a nation. Thanks to the hanging chads and all that. Don't even get me started on election night. Election night then didn't end for months, just so you know. That's how much our nation, and if you can imagine what that would be like now. We're going to mention it later, but one of the things that happened, actually, I guess there's other election stuff that happened. In Florida, they approved felons getting back their voting rights. It turns out there's a shitload of felons in Florida, 1.4 million of them, which makes that one of the largest restorations of voting rights in the history of the country. And in fact, the largest one since women had their voting rights restored. And I will say voting rights restored, not granted, because under the words of the Constitution say everybody has these rights inherently by existing, right? Because you were born and because you exist in this universe, aka created by God. I'm a pantheist, so those are somewhat synonymous. The fact that you exist, um, have all these rights inherently. And so it's not that somebody's granted a right to vote. No, that right is restored because you've always had it. So somebody had just taken it away for some time. That's how, and that's one of the beauties about some of the Constitution, about how it's written about that these rights, then, and the ones that aren't there you have, right, that aren't specifically listed. And that kind of reverse notion that we're not going to spell out everything you have. We're just going to say you have everything, and then draw some very fine limits when we can. Sorry. Voting rights restored, Florida. Big deal. Might make Florida not really even competitive in the next big election, which could be huge. I'm curious to see. Not that former felons are a particularly high percentage voting demographic, but still, with what looks like, and now the election in Florida coming down to, looks like under 50,000 out of over 8 million votes for both the governor and the Senate. It's that kind of thing, but that thing passed very high. So the American people, and this was one of the things. There's a number of good election sides for things that passed in Colorado. Here, one of the big things that the oil industry really saved a lot of money by getting voted down was some fracking limits that died. So, and a number of those other kind of more stringent environmental and those kind of things, a lot of those failed, but a lot of the voting rights things and also the gerrymandering stuff actually passed here and in a couple other states. And hopefully these can become some of the models for the rest of the country. But it will take ultimately probably some federal legislation on gerrymandering, which of course you can't get until we get the Senate back, which will probably take, again, until the boomers are gone. A number of states aren't going to change. And this is one of the things that also showed up for Texas and well, Florida, I was going to throw that into that same, Arizona, it looks like even also the election there was extremely close. It looked like it was going to McSally, the Republican, but I think they've actually put it now and said, no, we got to wait and see. So across the state, and I say Texas and Florida and Arizona because those are a lot of the states where old white people go, and old white people are going to be until they die, right? And so the proposition of turning those states and getting senators in statewide elections and getting maps that are realistic, right? Those are long-term, 10-year plus kind of situations where you have to look at big demographic changes before it's going to be even possible to really make that kind of change. But on the voting side, we saw, right, the 7% whatever blue wave. This country is not as divided percentage-wise. And also when you look at how that breaks down, in like places where I am, which is in the suburbs of Denver and Littleton, it's a pretty high percentage that are pretty distraught about the situation and voted to put a check on the president. So that's very, very heartening. And one of those things where, I think if this election had, if Hillary and him had been on the ballot again, I think we probably would have switched that pretty clearly. The attacks on the press become literal this last week. So the thing with the Costa deal, I'm not a huge fan of CNN. I've talked about this before. Corporate media is corporate media. Excuse me. I had some dinner earlier and I got the burps. So I'm not a huge fan of their approach and their kind of high-handed, high-minded, high-horsedness because they're in it for the cash, and there's no question about that. But they do have journalistic standards, and I can't really fault too much of his reporting. But what happened this last couple days with them going after the mic, which looks like it was actually pre-staged, because they were actually watching and laughing from the side now that we've seen some other journalists do some work, who had some pictures of Sanders and Kushner kind of smiling, ready for this girl to, who told her to steal his mic anyway. But the fact that the White House put out a doctored video, like a flat out doctored video, and used that as evidence to bar a reporter who's been something of a thorn in their side for a while now, right? Because of the doggedness and because of the actual journalistic work that he's done, and they don't like him. So to bar and then use that as justification is again another line that has been crossed. That's a pretty big one. And there have been people who are like, oh well, everybody, the rest of the media should just walk out and do that, and they will be replaced immediately by lackeys from Infowars, right? Because you can't have Infowars. I mean, they posted this video from Infowars. This is now, I mean, freaking green gay frog guy. Did you guys see the green frog guy? Green gay frog guy? Green gay frog guy, yeah. Green gay frog guy. The green gay frog guy. I saw this video, and I guess it's Alex Jones, and he's really kind of lost it, but he's the big green gay frog guy. Green gay frog guy. Anyway, I'm probably not going to do any green gay frog guys. I did do they do filters and stuff. I used to play with those a little bit, but we're just trying to get through this, and we're almost there. Looks like YouTube's gonna make it this time. Last time it chomped on my live thing before I finished. And actually, I am kind of close to finishing up. And thanks whoever you are that's wandered by to watch. We know now, after what happened with the shooting at the press wasn't there. I don't know what he would do. That's the thing that kills me about it, because he obviously doesn't like anybody questioning him, right? I mean, to me, it seems pretty clear that he's a narcissist, that he's got a personality disorder and can't deal with people not praising him, and particularly, some of the press stuff is pretty harsh, and as it should be, right? I mean, you're supposed to be the most powerful person in the world. So you should be able to deal with criticism constructively and be like, nah, whatever, I'm doing this anyway, thanks, But just this whole, having to try and crush and fight and just this pettiness of it is one of the things that really just, I don't know, it makes it really, really difficult to take him seriously. Yeah, but without that kind of check, obviously, it would be all, again, we see in other countries, and we don't actually, in the U.S., we don't get exposed to a lot of the kleptocracies that exist in the world and true corrupt government, because most of our allies and most of our press covers us and pretty much good stuff. But there are, and that kind of kleptocracy is, I think, pretty much what he's looking for, something like Putin enjoys, where there's nothing but praise, or even Erdogan in Turkey, although that relationship is obviously soured with the murder. But we know that he's not going to take responsibility for any of this. Any bad things, I should say, right? Any of his rhetoric. I mean, in that press conference, right, at the end of the campaign, their stuff was just flat out racist stuff. I mean, and then to be like, well, your question is racist. Then somebody needs to ask, not that you'll ever get a clear answer, but what does he even think that word means? Because what he's saying doesn't make sense. That question is not racist. It's a question about, are you doing something? So that doesn't. So anyway, he doesn't like it. He's not a terribly bright person, and that's one of the things. He's never actually in his life not been able to just kind of bluster and bullshit through. And so it worked to a certain degree, but not in the popular sense. The only reason it works because of the skewed way that our maps are set up right now. So we shall see moving forward. But there's the question of whether or not we're at that constitutional crisis. Some people obviously do think so, because he's put a lackey in charge as Attorney General, somebody who is specifically put in that job to protect him and to end this investigation. So that's dangerous. But like we said, we saw the Democrats take the House. Now, one of the things the Republicans did last, right near the end of for the Obama presidency is give the heads of the each of the committees in the House subpoena power, so they can basically say, give us documents or give us information unilaterally without having to take votes or go through any kind of real process. So they expanded the legislative. We'll see if they try and change that in the next couple months, but I believe the House gets to make their own rules once they start over. Excuse me. And they can, by resolution, adopt the previous ones. I'm not an expert on the arcane House stuff. I'm about to lose the voice. Thanks for dropping by. Thanks for commenting, whoever you may be. I appreciate it. I do a show pretty much every week. This is, like I said, episode 72. Usually do stuff on Facebook and post it here later. But looks like we made it through this time all the way. So we'll see how this looks and how it all works out. But thanks for dropping by. So peace out. I hope other folks see you. And we'll see you again next week. You got to keep paying attention, folks. This is some very important times. So big time. So keep on top of it. I was out today for the whole... cheers, Phil. I appreciate coming by. Have a good night. I was out tonight with folks who are ready to take to the streets if we need to, and we might. America! Gotta love it. 2018. Going through the thing. All right. Peace out. Have a good night, and thanks for dropping by. Let me see if I can save this correctly.